The elevator doors slid open on the 47th floor, releasing the faint scent of strong coffee mixed with the subtle trace of freshly mopped floors. Marcus Reed, 38 years old, wearing a deep navy blue uniform and carrying a bucket, stepped out in silence. A blonde assistant brushed past him, frowning. "Maintenance is in the basement, not the executive level. You must be lost." Marcus smiled gently and replied, "I've never been lost, especially not in a building I designed." She froze. No one laughed. No one spoke. Outside the tall glass windows, a diplomatic limousine pulled up to the front entrance. The game was about to begin. The scent of floor cleaner still lingered faintly in the hallway as Marcus pushed his supply cart down the row of glass-walled offices. His uniform was worn at the shoulders. His name tag faded to near illegibility. Yet every step he took landed with quiet precision. Position, sound, light. Calculated like a man who knew every inch of this place. The 47th floor held no secrets from him, not even the glances that slid past without ever meeting his eyes. He knew exactly when Eliza would step out of the CEO's office, clutching her laptop, gliding past like a breath of cold smoke. He knew the new interns always got lost at the junction between the regional collaboration wing and finance, where the floor had a scuff from last year's furniture swap. Marcus remembered every detail as if he'd built this place himself. But no one asked. No one cared. To them, he was just the nameless man at the door. Sylvanus Corporation was a world unto itself. This steel and glass headquarters stood as a global icon of future-focused tech, yet within, the hierarchy was rigid. The people in suits walked into boardrooms. Those in uniforms disappeared from sight. Young CEO Damian Cole was known for his disruption image, but behind the glossy slogans about change, the old structures remained untouched. Marcus didn't learn that from rumors. He learned it by cleaning the very rooms where power lived. He'd picked up trash after East Asia strategy meetings. He'd seen neglected presentation boards labeled China Market, Urgent, Secure Translator Needed. He'd wiped down tables after Eliza wrinkled her nose and told another assistant. The cleaner left some herbal smell, unaware that Marcus's mother had used that tea during her cancer treatments. That morning, like every morning, Marcus began by checking the heating in the main conference room, not because it was his job, but because he knew the system leaked cold air that caused frost buildup on the hollow projector. He changed the trash bag beneath the control panel, then bent to wipe the floor beneath the table. As he stood, his eyes met Damian's as the CEO passed by. The young executive didn't recognize him. He just asked Eliza, "Did the Mandarin translator confirm?" Eliza glanced at her phone, frowning. "They canceled. Sudden fever. The delegation arrives in 30 minutes. Damian froze. "Anyone else?" She shook her head. "No one with clearance. One mistranslation, and the $180 million deal is gone." Marcus said nothing. He wiped a smudge from the table's edge, placed a hand near the water cooler, and spoke in fluent, flawless classical Mandarin. "If I miss a tone, the deal will collapse, but if I don't, I can help." Eliza turned sharply, startled. Damian blinked. "What did you just say?" Marcus looked him in the eye for the first time and replied in English. "I said, I can help, if you'll let me." Eliza laughed, equal parts awkward and dismissive. "The janitor speaks ancient Chinese? This is absurd." But Damian didn't laugh. He studied Marcus for a moment, then said quietly, "What do we have to lose? Give him a chance." 10 minutes later, Marcus entered the prep room. Gone was the Navy uniform. Now he wore a crisp white shirt. He tied back his hair, washed his hands, straightened his collar. In the mirror, he saw not just himself, but the reflection of his late father. Professor Reed once said, "To understand a language is to understand the soul of a people." Marcus carried that truth, even through the years he dropped out of school to care for his mother. Outside the conference room, Eliza's voice was cold. "Don't embarrass us." Marcus didn't answer. He opened the door. The delegation from Beijing was already seated, eyes watching every move. Damian stepped forward. "This is Marcus Reed, East Asian Cultural Specialist. He'll be interpreting today." A flicker of surprise crossed a few faces. A young woman from the delegation, Lin Zhao, assistant translator, looked at Marcus as if trying to remember something familiar. The negotiation began. Marcus didn't just translate, he harmonized. Every phrase from the delegation was rendered not just in English, but in cultural intent and nuance. When one delegate used an old idiom, "Fire tests gold," Marcus countered with a classical reference, "A jade must be polished to shine." The room chuckled. Tension eased. Damien glanced sideways at Eliza, who said nothing, her grip tightening on her tablet. During the break, Lin Zhao approached. "How long have you studied Chinese?" she asked in Mandarin. Marcus replied in classical Mandarin, then shifted to ancient syntax. "Since I learned my father was the first to translate the Book of Songs into Old English." She paused, then nodded. "I believe you." A chime echoed from the distant elevator. Another group was arriving. But in that pause, everyone in the room looked at Marcus differently. Not as a janitor, not as a misnamed stranger, but as someone stepping out of the shadow the system had cast upon him. It was then that Marcus noticed something. A USB drive on the floor, barely visible, poking from the pocket of an abandoned suit jacket. Next to it, a note. "Don't let Eliza get this. D." Marcus bent down, picked it up, and slipped it into his pocket unseen. Outside the tall windows, the diplomatic limousine was pulling away. On the central screen, the contract now bore a green secured verification code, but as Marcus exited the room, he had no idea that elsewhere, an email was being sent from Eliza's internal account. Subject line, Phase 2. He'll vanish before next week. At that moment, Marcus was only thinking of one thing: opening the USB drive and uncovering the truth buried deep inside the company he'd spent 5 years cleaning, floor by floor. The USB drive sat quietly in Marcus's palm, so small it seemed harmless. But he had lived long enough to know that the most dangerous things often came in the quietest forms. During lunch break, when the halls were empty, he returned to the dusty storage room on the 15th floor. Rarely visited, rarely noticed. He inserted the drive into the old computer he still used to track supply lists. A single folder appeared, Norlight. He opened it. The screen lit up with a flood of documents, email exchanges between Eliza and an anonymous address, draft contracts with a strategic partner who had no international registration code, and finally, a list of internal staff. His name, Marcus Reed, was clearly marked. To be removed after agreement finalization. He wasn't surprised. It was just confirmation of what he'd always suspected. The whispers in the elevator, the glances from managers that slipped past him, the sudden shift in his work schedule after the internal newsletter praised him for returning a VIP's lost wallet. None of it was random. It was the system. At that very moment, on the 47th floor, Eliza stepped into the CEO's office, shutting the door with the same quiet care she used when saying something important. "The deal is signed, but I'm not comfortable," she said, voice lower than usual. Damien, reviewing the contract, didn't look up. "With who?" Eliza emphasized her words. "With Marcus. He knows more than he should." Damien finally looked up. "Do you have proof?" Eliza gave a dry laugh. "I have instinct, and mine's never wrong." Damien sighed. "Then let me speak with him myself." That afternoon, Marcus was summoned to the 48th floor. Executive-only territory, a place he'd never once stepped foot in over 5 years. The room was small, wood-paneled, softly lit. One long table, 2 men, Marcus and Damien. The young CEO sat opposite him, fingers laced, tapping the table gently. "Marcus, I'll be direct. You saved a major deal. I appreciate that." Marcus remained silent. "But," Damien continued, "let's leave things there. No need to draw any more attention." He tilted his head, watching for a reaction. Marcus replied calmly, "I never tried to draw attention. I just did what I knew needed to be done." Damien studied him a little longer. "I hope you understand. This company has its own structure, and those who disrupt it, even unintentionally, usually don't last long." Marcus nodded, the humility gone from his eyes. "I understand, but I studied classical philosophy once, and there's one thing I remember well. Order is not the same as justice. It's just quiet, designed by those who want to keep their chairs." Damien froze briefly. The meeting ended in silence. The next day, the changes were subtle, but unmistakable. Marcus's shift was moved from early morning to late night. His internal access code for the equipment room no longer worked. A mid-level supervisor called him Mark 3 times, ignoring him when he corrected it. In the cafeteria, he waited in line as always, but the server turned away mid-order, pretending not to see. It was all signal. The system was activating its defenses, but not everyone bowed to it. That afternoon, Lin Zhao found Marcus on the rooftop of the 22nd floor, the place he often went to breathe between shifts. She brought 2 cups of jasmine tea and handed him one in silence. I did some digging, she said, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline. You were a graduate researcher in sinology. 4 of your papers from Harvard are still cited. Marcus smiled faintly. A long time ago. Lynn asked quietly, "Why are you here?" Marcus took a sip, his voice steady. "Because my mother used to clean the lecture halls where I studied. When she was diagnosed with cancer, I dropped everything to care for her. After she passed, I didn't want to be anywhere else. I chose the job she once held, but did it my way." Lynn fell silent for a long time. Then finally she asked, "Does anyone know what you found?" Marcus shook his head. "Not yet, but I don't think that will last." And sure enough, it didn't. On Thursday morning, as Marcus was cleaning the central conference room, a young IT engineer, brown-skinned, thick glasses, name tag reading Daniel, passed quietly by and placed a folder beside Marcus's mop bucket. No words, no eye contact. Inside, Marcus found a printed email thread between Eliza and a senior director. "Once Norlight is signed, I'll purge all unnecessary staff, starting with engineering. As for Reed, I've already got my excuse." At the bottom, a handwritten note. "Be careful. Someone in IT is on your side." D. Marcus said nothing for the next 3 days. But in every step, every trash bin emptied, he gathered more pieces of the puzzle. He knew the day Eliza had lunch with a Norlight rep in the lobby cafe. He remembered the data audit technician who'd been fired a month earlier for refusing to delete anomalies. And he knew that when the time came to speak up, he'd need a way to make them listen. On the 4th day, after hours, Marcus walked into Damien's office, unannounced. The room was dim. Damien sat behind his desk, head in hand, looking more exhausted than ever. Marcus placed the USB and a thick folder on the table. "You should read this, then decide who you are in all this." Damien looked up, his expression flickering between caution and curiosity. "What do you think I can do? I don't have any formal proof." Marcus answered evenly. "Some truths don't need a title to be proven, just someone brave enough to call them by name." Then he turned and left, without waiting for a reply. That night, in the first-floor restroom, where he had once nodded off during night shifts while caring for his dying mother, Marcus took out his phone. In his archives, he found an old photo, his father, standing before a chalkboard, the words in classical Chinese written boldly. "The way that can be spoken is not the constant way." He closed his eyes, then opened them, and began typing his letter to the board of shareholders, attaching every piece of evidence. The game was no longer theirs to control. The board would decide, but the reckoning had already begun. On Monday morning, the Solvantis headquarters glowed as usual, but in the air, something felt quieter, more watchful. Damien entered the emergency board meeting he had personally called. His face was calm, but his eyes were alert. Eliza was already seated, arms crossed over her laptop, flanked by 3 senior executives. They had all received the presentation slides beforehand, but none of them truly knew what was about to unfold. Damien stood, voice low and firm. "Today, I've invited an internal employee to present findings related to transparency and ethics in our partnership with Norlight." A heavy silence followed. Eliza frowned, tilting her head. Damien looked toward the door. "Marcus, please come in." The door opened. Marcus Reed stepped inside, not as the janitor, but as something more. Pale gray shirt, dark blue tie, a sleek leather folder in hand. He walked slowly but with purpose, each step slicing through the tension that filled the room. No one spoke. Even Eliza leaned back slightly in her chair, surprised but already bracing herself. Marcus stood before the screen. No introductions, no small talk. He plugged in the USB drive. The first slide appeared. "Internal data analysis, Solvantis Q1 and Q2. His voice was steady, each word carving into the room like a blade. "My name is Marcus Reed. For 5 years, I've worked on the 47th floor as a janitor. But before that, I studied classical Chinese and worked as a contract analyst for 3 NGOs focused on Eurasian investment. I know how to read between the lines, and what I found here at Solvantis doesn't read right." The next slide displayed emails between Eliza and Norlight's team with a subject line: "Internal clause drafting, prioritize stakeholder group A, remove non-strategic personnel post-signing." A few directors shifted in their seats. Eliza scoffed. "I've never denied optimizing staff." Marcus remained silent, clicked forward. An audio clip played. Eliza's voice, crystal clear. "That floor guy? Let him sign the end-of-month inventory sheet, then I'll drop him. Clean, no questions asked. A director coughed, visibly uneasy. Eliza clenched her fists but kept her tone steady. This is unauthorized extraction of internal data, she said loudly. I demand the presentation be stopped. Damien interjected, his voice calm but firm. No, he's not done. Marcus gave a brief nod and opened the final slide. A counterfeit contract bearing Eliza Sharp's name, sent to a shell company, Norlight Global Ventures, with no official registration. Below, a financial flowchart showed post-deal funds funneling into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, registered under a newly created legal entity. An older board member exhaled softly. My God! Eliza shot to her feet. I was set up. This is all staged. Marcus didn't look at her. That contract was signed using a Level 1 executive digital seal, secured by fingerprint. Only 3 people have that clearance. Damien didn't sign it. I hold no rank. That leaves you. The room fell completely silent. Damien looked around, then turned to Marcus. Do you have verifiable proof this is real? Marcus placed a folder on the table. Printed copies, time-stamped by IT, signed by witnesses, and someone's willing to testify, someone who was forced out after refusing to tamper with the data. The door opened. Daniel, the young IT engineer, entered holding additional documents. Some board members started recording on their phones. Eliza snatched her tablet, ready to bolt. Damien rose from his seat. Security. 2 guards stepped in. Confiscate all personal devices from Ms. Sharp. She is under internal investigation for fraud and shareholder manipulation. Eliza turned, eyes burning into Marcus. You're just a janitor. Who do you think you are? Marcus met her gaze, calm, unflinching. I'm the one you never looked at twice. A shadow in the system you thought you controlled. But living in the shadows gave me the perfect view of how your light was twisted. Eliza shouted, He's lying! It's all fake! Marcus pulled out a security scan log, time-stamped during the contract's upload. I'm just putting the truth back where it belongs. Guards led Eliza out. No one stopped them. One young executive gave Marcus a quiet nod. Damien turned back to the microphone. I'll convene an emergency session with legal and the board. But first, on behalf of Sylvantis, I want to apologize for the 5 years we let a man like you go unheard. Marcus said nothing. He stepped back from the podium, eyes scanning the room that had once never known his name, never asked where he came from. Now, everyone was listening, truly listening. He turned to Damien. I don't need a title, but I won't let myself be erased again. What happens next is up to you. Damien stepped forward and extended his hand. I may not be worthy to offer it, but if you'll accept, I'd like you to join our strategic culture team, starting today. Marcus paused, then took the handshake, the first hand to meet his in 5 years. Downstairs, reporters gathered. Whispers of a whistleblower exposing executive misconduct had begun to spread. Sylvantis stock wavered. But this wasn't the end. It was the turning point. Marcus Reed stepped out of the boardroom. Head high, eyes calm. For the first time, people moved aside, not in fear, but because they finally saw him. The news of Sylvantis' emergency meeting spread faster than any market update. Within 24 hours, headlines flashed. Power unmasked. Janitor exposes internal scandal at global tech giant. What followed was beyond any one person's control. The internal investigation escalated, prompted directly by the board. Eliza Sharp was suspended immediately. Her system access was revoked. Legal was ordered to prepare a full report to the International Ethics and Audit Commission. But the shockwaves didn't stop. CNN Business uncovered Marcus's original submission to the board. Alongside the data, he had attached a handwritten 3-page letter. In it, he wrote, I didn't do this out of vengeance. I did this because I believe every system can be repaired if someone, anyone, is brave enough to speak up, even the lowest ranked. That letter was quoted across hundreds of news outlets. Others' Janitor became a symbol of integrity in the shadows. At Sylvantis, the cultural quake had just begun. HR was ordered to review all terminations in the last 6 months. 3 abrupt exits were minorities. A department head quietly resigned after being exposed for suggesting the streamlining of culturally incompatible staff. Damian Cole was summoned by major shareholders. In a private session, seasoned board members finally asked, how did a 5-year employee with no name end up saving the entire deal? Damian didn't deflect, because this system was never designed to hear from the bottom. Meanwhile, the Financial Regulatory Board began probing Solvantis's quarterly disclosures. Leaked emails revealed Eliza had once written, "As long as our stock stays green, who cares who we boot?" That line became a hashtag, #green-but-rotten. The press began digging into toxic corporate culture in tech. Solvantis was now at the center of the storm. Through it all, Marcus stayed quiet. He declined interviews, declined offers to sell his story. When a network producer invited him for a talk show, he replied by email, "I've been a background character in my own life for years. I don't need a spotlight. I just want light to reach the places it was once shut out." That Friday, a public hearing was held at Solvantis HQ. Topic: Leadership Accountability in the Eliza Sharp Affair. The room was packed. For the first time, Marcus stepped forward as a presenter. No script, just a story of mispronounced names, rejected entries, silent nights listening to boardroom talk while mopping floors, memorizing clauses because one day he'd need to prove he mattered. His voice wasn't loud, but no one dared interrupt. One board member, Rosa Gutierrez, silent her whole career, spoke up after. "I've sat in this seat for 20 years. Today is the first time I feel ashamed. I never asked a janitor's name." The room didn't clap. It just went silent, deeply and uncomfortably. Eliza was found guilty of misconduct, data tampering, and abuse of authority. She avoided jail time but was banned from executive positions in any affiliated company for 10 years. Former allies distanced themselves. A longtime director was forced to resign after hiding internal warnings. Damian, who had once chosen silence, stood and said, "I thought I was a reformer, but I upheld a ladder I didn't see. Marcus showed me that listening isn't a slogan, it's an action." After the hearing, Marcus exited through the back stairwell. A nervous intern caught up to him, handing him a small card. "Mr. Marcus, I wrote this just to say thank you. You made me believe I can speak up too." Marcus took it, said nothing, and nodded. The afternoon sky hung soft and gray over Manhattan. He didn't feel triumphant, only peaceful, like something had finally fallen into its rightful place. On the 47th floor, for the first time in years, the sign "Authorized Personnel Only" was taken down. Damian signed a directive. All roles now had a voice in cultural feedback. An independent team was formed to rewrite policy, and Marcus was named honorary advisor. But the true shift came quietly. Nods in hallways, small, awkward smiles from people who once looked away. A Vietnamese engineer once labeled culturally unfit was promoted to lead AI research. A black admin once passed over for promotion joined the product strategy team. And Marcus? He still showed up on time, still used the same mop every morning, even though his new contract granted him a special supervisory role. Someone once asked, "Why don't you just quit now?" Marcus smiled, sipped his tea, and answered softly, "Because sometimes to change a system, you have to stay inside it, long enough to understand it, and patient enough to make it change." 3 months after the hearing, the Solvantis office felt like an entirely different place. There were no loud announcements, no sweeping reforms, but deep within, the system's rhythm had changed. The frosted glass covering executive meeting rooms was taken down. Shift schedules no longer separated morning and night based on rank. Weekly meetings now included a new agenda item, voices from the front line. There were translators, rotating seats, and sometimes even a janitor sharing ideas on space organization. Marcus no longer mopped the floors of the 47th floor each day, but his old mop still stood in the corner of the storage room, a quiet symbol. He'd been invited to serve as Solvantis's global culture advisor and now led the Foundations Have a Voice initiative, a series of internal workshops where once sidelined employees were given space to speak. He refused a private office. Instead, he worked at a desk near the service elevator on the 23rd floor, where he could see the rush of people below. Once, a new employee asked, "Why don't you move up to a glass office?" Marcus smiled and replied, "Because I spent years being unseen. Now I want to be where I can see others best." The media eventually moved on, but the ripple effect remained. 4 major tech corporations announced internal audits of their power structures, citing the Marcus Reed effect. The phrase strategic janitor became a half-joking term in startups to refer to quiet but essential players. A company in Singapore printed Marcus's image on posters encouraging employee feedback. A high school in New Jersey hung his photo in the library beneath the quote, "Know who you are. Don't ask permission to exist." At Solvantis, Damian Cole remained CEO, but now walked the halls without an entourage. During a talk with MBA students, he said, "I used to think changing the logo meant changing the culture. Marcus taught me real change begins when you learn to truly look people in the eye." New leaders filled former seats, many of them once dismissed as too emotional, too soft, or not assertive enough. They were the ones who had listened to Marcus before anyone knew his name. Eliza Sharp disappeared from the headlines. A quiet LinkedIn post appeared 6 months later. "It's time I relearn how to listen, starting with those I once overlooked." Public opinion was divided, but Marcus never commented. In an internal interview, when asked about her, he simply said, "I wasn't against anyone. I just couldn't accept the way the system forgets the people holding it up." That year's Solvantis year-end ceremony marked the first time Marcus stood on stage to present the Silent Architect Award to a logistics employee. He walked up with quiet dignity, handed over the plaque with both hands, then gripped the recipient's shoulder and whispered, "Keep your essence, even when the wind shifts." Many in the audience teared up, not from the speech, but because they saw themselves in Marcus's journey, quiet, persistent, and finally, seen. That night, Marcus returned to the 47th floor. The old conference room had changed. Now every seat had a nameplate, including those for technical staff. A young intern was adjusting a projector, struggling with the settings. Marcus stepped in, smiled, and said, "Flip it! The light's angled backward." The intern looked up, puzzled. "How do you even know that?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He straightened a misaligned plant, then pointed to the glass board on the wall. Etched faintly beneath the ceiling lights was a technical floor plan of the building. In the bottom right corner, a line read, "Marcus Reed, Maintenance Staff 2020. He turned to the intern. "Because I drew it." The intern stared, wide-eyed. Marcus smiled gently. "And I've never been lost in a place I helped build." A few weeks later, Marcus received an invitation from an international education organization. "We'd like you to lead a mentoring program for the next generation of business leaders." He accepted without hesitation. At his first session, 8 young people sat around a round table of every race, gender, and background. No one sat higher than the others. Marcus listened to each story. Someone who was always misnamed, someone rejected for their voice, someone once laughed at for wanting to be a manager. When a young woman asked, "How did you stay calm for 5 whole years?" Marcus looked at her, not with doubt, but with certainty. "Because I didn't live to prove myself to them. I lived to fully become who I am, without asking permission." The session ended in silence, not out of reluctance, but because everyone felt lighter. Marcus walked each person to the door, then returned to his desk and opened his laptop. Waiting in his inbox was a message from Damian. "Would you help me prepare my speech for next week? The topic is leadership from the margins." Marcus typed back a single line. "Start by calling everyone in the room by their correct name and look them in the eye." Before shutting off the lights, he stepped into the hallway. Outside the wide windows, the city glowed. Every window, every car's motion below carried a rhythm of new life. Marcus stood still for a moment, then nodded softly. No trumpets, no new titles, just a world where everyone, finally, gets to be truly seen. Even the doorman on the 47th floor. The story of Marcus Reed, the doorman on the 47th floor, reminds us that a person's worth isn't defined by a title or the suit they wear, but by their quiet integrity, their unwavering ethics, and the wisdom they gather over time. Sometimes the very ones who are overlooked hold the key to awakening an entire system. Marcus didn't fight with anger. He stood with dignity. He didn't chase the spotlight because he was the light in the dark. And maybe each of us, somewhere on a floor in the building of life, has once been underestimated, pushed to the margins. But remember this, as long as you don't forget who you are, you will always have the power to step into the room the world once said you didn't belong in. If this story touched something in you, hit like, share it with someone who could use a little hope, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story, where quiet souls turn the tables with courage and self-respect. We'll be back soon with more journeys to inspire.